Racism in job. This blog concentrates on the issue of racism in the employment process. The issue of race has always been a sensitive one, and the applicant who experiences an unpalatable treatment because of his/her skin color is hardly likely to interpret it as anything but racism. Racism would be interpreted by most people as a deliberate form of behavior by one person towards another person because of some racial characteristic. Racism in job is a racism in which an individual is mistreated or denied opportunities by another person due to their membership, whether known or unknown, of a certain race or ethnicity. Institutional racism is the differential access to goods, services and opportunities by race. Racism in job interviews. Racism is still a form of discrimination in American society today, even if it has been improved over the years. The history of racism started as early as the 15th century, when the Europeans began to slave Africans for their labor. After the Civil War, African Americans were still treated differently than white people. America saw this problem and developed laws that were meant to stop racism from occurring in day-to-day activities such as job training and interviews. However, this was not enough to completely stop racism's occurrence in today's society. Being able to recognize racism in job interviews is important for applicants so that they can keep their focus on the interview rather than being held back by a biased interviewer. There are different forms of racism that could be present in an interview, including not introducing yourself. Racism in job recruitment. Racism in job recruitment describes how employers in the United States tend to discriminate against workers from certain racial backgrounds, even when this racism is unwarranted or unjustified. For example, one study showed that white job applicants are more likely to get hired by an employer when the employer only has their name for reference. Racism in job recruitment is a major problem. Black people are perceived as potentially criminal and discriminated against in criminal justice decisions, including in job recruitment. Racism in job recruitment could be related to other types of discrimination, such as age and gender. A person's age or gender is also a person's background, so racism could also be referred to as discrimination of a person's background. Racism in job. Racism in office. People must stop being afraid to speak out. We need to show our support for everyone. Racism has no place in the office or any place of work. Ever seen the video of racism in an office? The one where an employee of a company is harassed by her boss because he's racist to her? This is racism. It's a documentary by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It shows racism in offices, as well as other forms of discrimination, such as gender and religion-based discrimination. Racism was created by Marshall Jones and produced by Chris Pappas, in 2017. It won the International Documentary Award at the Toronto Film Festival and the Grand Jury Prize at the Cannes Film Festival. Racism in promotions. Racism in work promotions is a real and powerful factor. Racism within the workplace is far from over, but attention from media and social justice movements has helped expose racism and discrimination within the workforce. It's not uncommon for racism to play a significant part in the promotion of undeserving candidates at work. Understand that every workplace is not safe and you need to question the authority of an office or board. Racism in promotion was examined as a function of applicant race, white versus black, decision-making procedure, disjunctive versus conjunctive, and the work record of the applicants. It was predicted that the best qualified black applicant would be severely discounted relative to the best qualified white applicant when a conjunctive procedure was used for the promotion decision, but that application of a disjunctive procedure would eliminate this bias. Racism by colleagues. Racism is prejudice and discrimination against people of other races. It affects all healthcare workers, but especially those who are black or from ethnic minorities, who may find that their colleagues make assumptions about their abilities. Racism can also affect cohesion between colleagues and undermine effective teamwork. Dealing with racist comments, jokes, and other conversations at work can be unpleasant and intimidating. This can make it difficult to know how to respond appropriately in the moment. As such, it's wise to consider some potential responses in advance so that you don't feel caught off guard when these scenarios arise. Racism in job in rural areas. Racism exists in positive discrimination in job in rural areas. Effects of ethnicity and gender on rural residents' perceptions of job opportunities in their region. Based on a descriptive survey, the researcher found that more job opportunities are provided for males than females, and it is mostly males that have access to jobs in rural areas. Racism in job in urban areas. This article addresses one of the most common issues in urban areas where working people face racism. It is observed that racism is not only found in job but also in healthcare, education, transportation, and even in police service. Increasingly, we see that the most affected by racism are people of color living in urban areas. Racism is a form of institutionalized discrimination, inequality, and segregation based on race. Racism is a major issue in some of the urban areas. The concept of it has been around for many years, ranging from as early as the United States of America's inception. Dr. Martin Luther King fought to end racism every way he could. Europeans experienced firsthand when they arrived in Africa and the Levant. Working within empires like the Dutch East India Company, created conditions where Muslims, and later, non-Christians more generally, were employed as workers in a colonial situation. Racism in job in developing countries. Racism is a glaring problem in these developing countries with a growing migrant population. The awareness of this type of discrimination has been heightened as an increasing number of ethnically diverse peoples have moved from their homelands to new communities, seeking freedom and economic opportunities for themselves and their families. Racism has been a problem that many countries still need to address. The reasons are clear, but the solutions have always been unclear. Racism in developing countries is institutionalized racism that is evidenced by discriminatory, exclusive, and preferential socioeconomic, educational, and cultural measures, policies, and practices against members of a specific race or ethnic group. Stigma and bias are sometimes connected to one's race since one is the causative agent of the other. This has contributed to racism in many countries today. Racism leads to discrimination in income, ethnicity, and gender because of a person's background. Racism in job in developed countries. Racism and discrimination against minorities is alive and well in the workplace in developed countries, with new research suggesting that racial bias is getting worse. Despite many, sometimes conflicting, commands of anti-discrimination law, in most developed countries discrimination on the basis of skin color is legal if practiced by majorities. People do understand this, and it does affect how race and racism are understood by citizens of those countries. A meta-analysis of the literature on labor market discrimination in developed countries revealed that ethnic minorities and foreigners, i.e., those who, by definition, have less social capital, face substantial discrimination in their job hunting activities, especially in the Anglo-Saxon countries.